Works and Pensions. I sat there in front of these three people, plus the Works and Pensions guy, and I felt like I was trying to rob people. I was made to feel so small, especially by the guy from Works and Pensions. I tried to explain to him that when due to my injuries, over the years it had got worse and worse and worse, and the arthritis got worse. He's then stated that, well, arthritis doesn't spread. If anyone has got arthritis, or anyone who knows anyone's got arthritis, once you get to one place, it does spread. So I was there for about 40 minutes being questioned, and it did feel like I was on trial. After I was going to go out, I said, okay, stand aside, we'll make a decision. I sat outside and I thought, I'm not going to get this, because I was made to feel that, was I claiming stuff I didn't need? Was I asking for stuff that I didn't deserve? Yeah, you sit there and think, well, I'm in pain 24 hours a day now, and I can't put up with what I'm going, and I can't cope with what I'm doing. I need help. And the guy from the Department of Works and Pensions, who saves the country money, he kept on saying that you don't really deserve this, you can cope with that. You've got to be wanting to go to work, Mr. Davies. So how can you be that ill? You need money from us. And when I served, regiment I served, it was, if you feel, well, pain is a sensation, sensation is pleasure. That is what I was told. You drive yourself to the edge every day, you feel pain, yeah, everyone feels pain, but you drive yourself past that pain and you go on. That is how I was brought up, that is how I trained, and that is how I've taken on life so far. Always go to the limit and go further. You never know how far you can go till you're right. That's all I've ever done. And I tried to explain that to the guy, and he wouldn't have it. So I sat outside thinking, this is gone, I've lost it. And then I go into the meeting again, they call me in, and I sat there, and the three guys say, okay, Mr. Davies, sorry to have called the trouble, but we now grant you 50% disability, and we'll back pay you till you first signed the forms. At this point I broke down, not through being wimpy, but the frustration, the years I'd fought to try and prove, look, there is something wrong, stand up and be counted please, because you've caused this, I haven't caused it. The Department of Works and Pensions then, probably pissed off, he left, and I was taken into a little room to gather myself together again, because I was in bits. One of the guys from the tribunal came in and he said, Mr. Davies, I'm really sorry what happened. He said, but to tell you the truth, this happens an awful lot. People try to come forward to claim for disability allowances, and they're turned down all the time. And people have to put through this all the time to try and gain something. It's not right, and it's not that the system needs to change, but we can't change the system. That's how it is. So now I find myself with disability 50%, sometimes more. That was nearly 7 years ago. Things have got worse since then. There's no cure for arthritis. They can save it for a little bit, but no, it'll just get worse and worse. But also, I looked and asked my friends online, I said, okay guys, I'm going to give this speech, I'm going to let people know, what do you think, how have you been treated by the government since you left the army? And one word came back, and it began with S, it ended in T, because that's how they've been treated. I've got friends, close friends now, who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. What happened in the Falklands, what happened in Northern Ireland was phenomenal. We go on about the Gulf War, there's been 400 people in the Gulf War over 10 years. The Falklands War lasted just over 3 months. There was 255 people killed in that war. But it wasn't even called a war, it was called a conflict. That's how fierce things were. I have a friend who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. He went to ask for help. Through the stress disorder, he lost his home, he lost his wife, and he lost his self-dignity. He lived in a car for 7 months because he didn't want help. He thought he could get through it alone. It was only through us helping him out, getting money together, forced him to accept the help, that we got him to get a flat and get him on his feet. This guy had worked for in the army since 1977. When he left the army, he worked for the MOD as a police officer. He'd done 40 years service for the MOD, and he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. He was made redundant. He left the job on the Friday, Nothing. They kept him waiting 3 months for his pension. By this time, his family life had broke down, and his wife had took half his pension. So he had most of his money. So he was left destitute more than anything else, with all the debts that had accrued up. So post-traumatic stress is a big, big deal out there. I speak to guys all the time, online. Now, luckily, we have Facebook, and I'm a member of some groups. I've got lots of friends from the airborne regiments and gunner regiments, and also infantry regiments who I speak to and I've met many times. I go to reunions now, and I sit there and I look around the table and I think, who's going to be here next time? Just over a year ago, I went to a funeral of he was an ex-paratrooper, he was a medic, served in the Falklands, and he committed suicide. He drove up into the hills, around Brill, put his exhaust pipe on, put a pipe through the window and went to sleep. They woke up. That was just one. I know 14 people that have done that since. There was 255 people killed in Falklands, and I know that there are more than that have committed suicide over the years, be that soldiers and seamen that have gone. So the aftermath of war is horrendous. Post-traumatic stress disorder is horrendous. It's now being recognised. But people have to go to charities to rely on help, because the services that we have in the NHS and cannot cope with the amount of people that go there. There's cuts after cuts after cuts. Governments are not standing up to take account of what happened. Governments start wars. It's not the soldiers. We're just there to try and sort it out. That's it. Now, yeah, okay. Okay, I'll just say a phrase here. Okay, this is what someone decides is classed as a veteran. Okay? What is a veteran? A veteran, whether on active service or discharged, retired or on reserve, is someone who at one time wrote a blank cheque payable to the Queen and to the country for an amount up to and including his life. Okay? It's about time the governments that we have now wrote us cheques and gave us the money and the help that we need. So, thank you.
Thank you. And now I hand over to Diana. Diana's the Assistant General Secretary of Unite, and she covers the qualities and also a transport brief.
Excellent.
Thanks, Diana.
Thanks, Sean. Yes, so very pleased to be here, and just following on from what's been said so far, really pleased that Unite, working with UK Disability History Month, is supporting this event and also the month as a whole, because I think disabled people's lives and history have been hidden for too long, and it's really important, this decision to have a month every year where we start to reconnect with that, not as something from the past that's gone, but something that people, as Troy has said and Lindsey has said, something we're still living with and learning from today. And the point of learning from the past sometimes is to understand how we are where we are, but it's also to look at what do we need to do for the future to prevent the difficulties that people have struggled with all this time. And so many people, disabled people's experiences are not known about. And the minimum we can do is let people know about those experiences and make sure that disabled people of today are not hidden in our society as well. So that's the first thing. Also, and this is a range of unions here, and I know each year different unions have the lead role with UK Disability History Month, but I think the more that we can build support across the trade union movement and beyond for activities around this month, the better. So I think my beginning and end will be to say, what can we do to take this forward, to build on it. Secondly, I just to mention that over the years it's been clear to me that within Unite, a number of the sectors where we organise do have a large proportion of ex-service people working in them. And whether they are disabled or not, and maybe insufficient of their experiences has come out in their roles, in a way that perhaps we need to look at the support that we're giving our membership. Is it broad enough to support ex-service personnel, particularly who may have conditions or impairments as a result that don't come to the forefront till many years later in their lives. Yesterday we had a Union Equality Reps fringe meeting that was organised, and it was very clear that not only are a high proportion of union equality reps disabled people, but also all union equality reps are dealing with disability issues as a major part of their responsibilities. So I think why that's so important, I think, is because it's very clear that UK Disability History Month is not talking about issues that are gone, it's talking about issues that are around today. And I think it's not just going to be equality reps that need to deal with this, it's got to be all union reps and all trade unions. So I think the message from that meeting yesterday was, alongside statutory rights for union equality reps so they get the time to do what they've got to do, we're also making sure that issues of disability are right in the forefront of our workplaces and are taken seriously, properly seriously by employers, so that you don't have to be the person who invents the policy in the workplace when you work there as a disabled person or you become disabled during your working life, but there's already access built into that workplace. So looking back at the theme that's been picked for this year, one of the things that I've often done as a campaigner on women's equality is when people say, oh well, women couldn't do those jobs, or oh well, you don't understand, childcare is really expensive. When you look back to the war years, in fact, there were examples of women doing all sorts of jobs that it was considered impossible for them to do when there weren't men there to do them. People may have seen the film Rosie the Riveter, which is a great story of a woman who was a riveter in the States. But secondly, also, there were nurseries put throughout communities, supported, and it was recognised as completely fine and normal. But it was done in time of war. And it seems to me, and then when the war ended, it's, oh, well, everything's going to go back to normal now. What normal meant discrimination and lack of support services. And I think with disability, the positive things that we have that offer support seem, and obviously Richard will talk in more depth about this, often have their origins in high numbers of disabled people after the First and Second World Wars. And so that, in a way, has shaped them. But understanding that, but then those programmes and support services being available to all disabled people, and the struggles now with saying we want a social model that properly recognises the role of disabled people, there's a danger that you get some false conflicts developing around that. So I think understanding how these things were set up and what they were seeking to achieve is very important as to how we deal with them, because one of the struggles that we've had, for example, over Remploy, is a danger of losing support for disabled people that they want and need in the interests or cuts being justified on the grounds of disability equality. So I think it's really important that we take that head on and we understand where this is coming from. So looking at the background to it, and I thought I'd just pick the words from one of the histories that I looked at, where they said that the government training centres set up in 1919 were part of the political and moral appeal to support disabled ex-service people. And so I think that sets the context for why those were set up, whereas in the Second World War, the Rehabilitation and Resettlement of Disabled Peoples Commission that was set up in 1943, as we came towards the end of the war, was really trying to deal with labour shortages and an economic approach, and how can we get the maximum number of people working. And therefore, and when I first was active around representing disabled people, the one bit of legislation that we had was the Disabled Persons Employment Act, which said you have to have a 3% quota of disabled people employed or there will be a problem. And if you don't have the quota employed, then you should only employ disabled people until you reach the quota. And at that time, so that came in 1944 initially, and I got the graphs at the time which showed that at that time there were a high number of employers that did meet that quota, but it just tailed off. And then I started to ask questions, well, how many employers have ever been sued for not meeting the quota? And you may remember, some of you that more of my age group, in Lambeth, when they actually obeyed what it said in the law and said, okay, we're only going to recruit disabled people until we reach the 3% quota. And they were pilloried all over the place just for saying they were going to comply with the legislation. So, of course, it's offensive to say disabled people are part of a quota and not anything else. On the other hand, just saying we're committed to disability discrimination, but coincidentally we aren't employing any disabled people, isn't very good either. So I think managing these transitions, because one of the things the quota did do was say we want disabled people in work and we're going to check they're in work and we're going to put a requirement on you to employ disabled people, which was a positive action measure, which described in the right ways has still got a place in today's workplaces. Recently, and I think it's been said by both previous speakers, he's still here, that I think post-traumatic stress and mental health issues have come much more to the forefront, and increasingly for everybody. But I think that how we, as trade unions, and how employers are reacting to mental health issues in the workplace is something that we still have a huge amount to do. And I think that certainly awareness is raising over post-traumatic stress, but I think it's been clear, and obviously Troy has touched on this, there can be issues that arise in the workplace that are to do with wars or conflict in the past, where things have been suppressed and they come out later in life. And I think it's something, therefore, that every rep would need to be aware of, and people would need to be able to feel they had the confidence to talk to their rep, which is why having equality reps alongside shop stewards is really important. So my final point is there are some really important things, and okay, maybe some of this didn't come from the best possible motives or the best possible reasons. They're things that should have been happening anyway, but there were things that developed as a result of war to support disabled people. But now, today, we have got to look at, I think the wording from the pamphlet is the struggle for rights and social equality for all disabled people is the only long-term solution, which I totally agree with. But in order to get there, we've got to understand and know about what happened in the past so that we can move forward. We need to see that trade unions and disabled workers themselves are central to this change, and make sure that we do not have, as an excuse for cuts, that people are being positive about the social model of disability. We want to make sure we keep what support we can, but we redefine it so it fits the needs that we've got of today. So thanks to everybody for all that they're doing on this. A big tribute to UK Disability History Month, because I think you have uncovered something very special here. Siobhan Endine is the National Disability Officer of Unite, the National Equality Officer that's responsible for disabled members. Our Disabled Members Committee will make sure that this continues to be on the agenda, and things that I can do support. I'm very pleased to do so.
Thank you, Diana. It's interesting that Diana was talking about Lambeth, and it was Ted Knight was pilloried back then, and he hasn't stopped being pilloried as far as I know. He's still fighting the good fight. Last but not least, we have Rieser, who's we've all got to thank really for the work he's done in and around the UK Disability Month over the last few years. Rich is the National Coordinator of UK Disability History Month, and he's also an expert disability equality trainer, disability consultant and a teacher. Richard, over to you.
Thanks very much. And thanks, Diane, and all your colleagues for taking up the challenge when I came to support this, because I think the amount of nonsense that we're being subjected to in every city and every town around the country on this 100th anniversary belies the reality of people's lives and what actually happened to those people who went off to fight, and many didn't come back, and many more came back, but with impairments of various sorts. And the societal response to it was for the government to basically wash its hands of it and see as much as it could. This isn't our problem, this is the people of England's problem, therefore you have to put your hand in your pocket and put money in the tins and the charities. And it was a charity response that was put forward. There was no attempt by the British government to actually do adequate provision, retraining, or support in terms of pensions. And we've heard the story of how long it takes to get a pension. If you look on page 5 of this bulletin, you can see the ridiculous criteria that were set for pensions, and even the top 100% pension was only 40 shillings, which was less than half of the average manual wage. So it wasn't something you could actually live on. It was a sentence of living in poverty for the whole of your life. And then if you had, 15 or 20%, it was down to risible numbers of 12 shillings a week. Now, interestingly enough, officers and NCOs had 2 to 3 times as much as this. So the class dimension was still there. And when it came to post-traumatic stress disorder, the ranks were just accused of cowardice, and there's 306 families still waiting for apologies from the government who were shot at dawn, who obviously had post-traumatic stress disorder, but nothing yet has even been done on this 100th anniversary about that. Many more obviously were disposed of in other ways. But the attitude to physical and mental impairment, which was obvious then, and why we fight on these issues in disability history, is to look at how responses have been in the past, but to recognise that many of these responses are still there today. They might be slightly different, but the stereotypes and the ideas of difference are still there. And the reality, particularly when one day you're a so-called normal person, the next day you're not, is actually harder than for someone like me who had polio when I was 9 months and I've grown up with it. But I still would say that we're facing the same oppression, the same thing is happening, that somehow people are seeing you as less than human. You're either an object of charity, or other people and other services are going to sort you out. You don't have autonomy and control in your life in the way that other people do. And that still remains the case, even though our government has signed up to independent living as an international human right. It isn't the case, and in fact there are cases now against the British government at the Human Rights Court in Geneva over their lack of treatment of disabled people. What was also interesting is the current range of cuts that are going through, of which we know there are many different sorts of cuts, and disabled people, particularly those with severe impairment, are in the firing line and taking a much bigger whack than anybody else. That has caused problems with some of the champions, like the 2 princes who are supporting current disabled veterans, saying, well, it's not fair that they should be having their disability benefits cut. Well, I agree, but it's also not fair that anybody else should be having their disability benefits cut. And I think it's important to not allow one group of special pleading to be set up against all other disabled people, because that has been a trap that disabled people's organisations have fallen into, the British Legion being one of them, who have often done special pleading at various